Hey guys, welcome to the Short Term Show special episode series on Shenandoah, Virginia. A couple things I want to hit you with first before we get into the episodes. One, current purchase prices and current income data can be found on our website at theshorttermshop.com. So make sure you check that out because that can change all the time. Also, if you guys want to hang out with us and just talk about short-term rental stuff, you can do that with us and 60,000 of our closest short-term rental investor friends at our Facebook group. Same title as my book, Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth. Make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast and all of our podcasts if you can, because that really helps us out. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Short Term Shop YouTube, and then also follow us on Instagram at The Short Term Shop. And if you're ready to buy a house with us in any of our 20 markets, you can email us at agents@theshorttermshop.com or really any of the avenues that I just gave you. Now let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome to everyone's favorite episode of the special episode series, this time on Shenandoah, the numbers episode. Everybody waits, they skip forward. They don't actually wait. They skip up to the numbers episode. So today we're talking about numbers. We are only talking about income numbers and kind of how to analyze. We're not talking about expenses. That will be its own episode coming up next. So this is only income numbers that we're talking about here. Several familiar faces that you will know from both this and previous episodes and podcasts. We've got Alan and John. Alan, you want to introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll go over to John?
Yeah, if I can get unmuted here. Yeah, so I'm Alan Taylor, work here for the Short Term Shop in the Shenandoah region. I've lived in the Virginia area for the past decade or so, and really love this area. It is not native to this area, but we've decided this is where we're going to stay, and love the Shenandoah region in particular. Get out there quite a bit, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. Highly recommend. If you've never been here, come on down.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Alan. All right, John.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm John Bianchi. I'm the Airbnb data guy. I'm the head of data for TechVestor, which is the largest short-term rental fund in America. It's my job to figure out, what is the absolute best market for us to enter into, what's the best thing to purchase within that market, and how to maximize the revenue of every single property that we get. And I also have a Airbnb data consulting business on the side, and products and softwares and free courses on YouTube as well. So I live and breathe Airbnb data. Haven't been to Shenandoah,
awesome.
But I feel like I want to go now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, come on.
Yeah.
All right. So at the beginning of these, if you guys have been listening to our other markets, you can skip right through this. But for those who are just now coming to us, who found this because they want to buy in Shenandoah specifically, we're going to talk about the analysis of short-term rentals really quick and some best practices before we get into the actual numbers of this market. So when you're analyzing short-term rentals or when you're listening to podcasts about real estate investing, there's a lot of keywords and phrases that get thrown around. We're not going to go into all the ones that you don't really need too much, but the main one, the most usual way to analyze a short-term rental, and I'm not saying that there aren't other ways that you can use, but I don't want any comments on my YouTube telling me I'm wrong. I'm acknowledging that there's other ways, but cash on cash return is typically the best way that we have at the moment to kind of analyze short-term rentals. So, Alan, what do you want to give us a definition of cash on cash return? Or I can, if you want, since I've done this about 10 times already. Up to you.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in and then you can correct me. How about that? So cash on cash return is like essentially the return you get on the money you put into the deal. So, you can measure that by the down payment or the cash investment you have in the deal, and then the annualized return you see as a result of that.
Sweet. So explaining to myself, I have to have it explained to me like this, or to anyone else who needs it explained to them like this, like a 5-year-old. It's basically the money that you put in, the cash you put in at the beginning of the deal, whether that's, your down payment, your closing costs, all that stuff, versus the amount of cash you have in your bank account at the end of the year after all expenses, including your mortgage. So that's very important because there are other analysis tools and formulas like net operating income that are used a lot in commercial real estate. And sometimes people don't realize when you're new that net operating income does not include your debt service. So if you don't realize that, then things can look really, really great because it's your net income before your mortgage, which is your biggest expense. So just keep that in mind. Cash on cash return includes your mortgage. It's usually the easiest way I've found because it doesn't determine any type of value of the property. Like when you're using cap rate, I don't want to get too off in the weeds on things that you don't really need to know, but cap rate, if you guys see that, It does have some value in just kind of knowing a few things about the property, but typically that's used for commercial properties because the cap rate determines what the value of the property is. So the income determines the cap rate, which determines the value of the property. When we're dealing with short-term rentals, since those are residential still, technically that may change in the future if banks decide to look at these as commercial assets. But as of now, they're still residential, which means they're valued based on the sold residential comps, just like a primary home would be. So it doesn't matter how much the property makes in the eyes of the appraiser. It's valued based on sold comps. Now, the income can indirectly affect the value in terms of what an investor might be willing to pay for it. But in terms of what the bank is looking at, doesn't really have any effect. So we focus over here on cash on cash return. Now, one thing I will say about cash on cash return is that there have been different rules of thumb for what cash on cash return should be in the short-term rental world over the past several years, because this is still a relatively new asset class and things have changed a lot over the past 5, 6, 7 years. So the rule used to be it needed to be 30%, it needed to be 20%, depending on who you talk to. I like to look for a property that I can get to a 20% cash on cash return, not one that's doing that already, because that's not going to exist. You're looking for properties where you can find the opportunity to either add amenities, add bedrooms, anything income producing to get that property up to a 20% cash on cash return. Now, cash on cash return is not the be all end all either. If you're buying a property that you have to put a bunch of work in up front, like if you've got to make your down payment and then you're also doing a big rehab, your cash on cash return is going to look terrible in the year that you do that rehab. So let's use our brains here and understand that you're not going to be doing that rehab every single year. So your cash on cash return is going to change year over year. Another thing is cash flow. So some investors prefer to look at what their cash flow is going to be, their monthly cash flow or their annual cash flow, more so than what the cash on cash return is going to be. You cannot necessarily have the best of both of those worlds, because the more money you put down up front, the lower your cash on cash return will be, but the higher your cash flow will be. And the less money you put down, the lower your cash flow will be, but the higher your cash on cash return. So you kind of can't have both of those. You're not going to put down 30% or 40% and have like this crazy, amazing cash on cash return, but your cash flow will be great because you're putting down more and your payment will be lower. But you're not going to see you're not going to put down 50% and have like a 50% cash on cash return. It's just not how it works. I think I've confused you enough. So, do your own homework on cash return versus cash flow. Now we'll get into talking about the numbers of this market where Mr. John Bianchi comes in. So John, do you want to give us just kind of like a high level, and then we'll ask you some questions based off of that?
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. Love the analysis of cash on cash and cash flow, by the way. And you did say you kind of can't have both. I would say you can't have both. You have to have one or the other. It's just kind of how it is, right?
Right.
So anyways, just want to throw that out before I get into all the numbers. But I did my research on Shenandoah Valley like I usually do before hopping on these podcasts. And I've never been there, so I don't have that local knowledge, which is, where Alan is going to step in. And we were talking actually before we got started, and I realized that majority of the locations that I analyzed for Shenandoah Valley was not all of the locations. And so it's a very large area, right? Like a 2-hour radius. And I analyzed the markets that were from Elkton to Shenandoah to Stanley to Luray, all the way up to Fort Royal. They're kind of like all in a line there, but there was a couple that I was still missing out on. So the numbers that I'm going to be talking about are a portion of the valley, but not the entire valley, just to kind of throw that out there, right? Now, the first thing I want to kind of talk about is that this is a market that benefited greatly from COVID, right? It's one of these areas where everyone was escaping the cities and going out to the Shenandoah Valley, just like they're going over to Blue Ridge, they're going to Gatlinburg, all these different places, right? And that definitely helped create some really killer listings and great properties, turned it into even more of an Airbnb location than it was. But from what I'm seeing, it's the market is more consistent nowadays and more level and more of like the true type of travel destination that it always has been, right? So that's what I'm seeing in the numbers, and what I'm liking to see in the numbers is the fact that it's sort of leveled out. It's like it's where it should be or where it will be moving forward. It's not this what is that called, where it's something is only popular for like a year or two, you know what I mean, like, or overly popular, a hype, or anyways, not sure if that's making sense what I'm trying to say, but anyways, so what I wanted to what I always like to do as well is point out some interesting things that I found out about the market as I was analyzing it. And honestly, there's one thing that just stands out above everything, and it's the fact that the 2-bedrooms kill it. Like, they crush it. The 2-bedrooms actually do way better than I was expecting. And I was reviewing, I always like to take all of the bedroom counts and kind of line them up side by side and see if there's like one size of home that tends to do better than the others. And the 2-bedrooms honestly really surprised me. Now, the 3-bedrooms do really well also, but the 2-bedrooms are not far off from how well the 3-bedrooms do. And then when it gets to like the 4s, 5s, and 6s, naturally they're doing better. But I would say personally that there's more consistent proof that a 3-bedroom and a 2-bedroom perform really well if you have a certain type of listing. And so for me, when I was reviewing this data, I was like, I got excited. And the reason I got excited is because naturally a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom is going to be significantly cheaper than a 4, 5, 6, or 7, right? And so it makes it for this like easier entry point to be able to still have a property that would cash flow for you, right? And if you had the additional money to get a 4-bedroom or a 5-bedroom, you're going to have the competitive advantage, right? But for those people that don't have the ability to buy those sized homes, you have these 3s and 2s that can cash flow for you. So to me, I just thought this was like super intriguing. And anyways, I thought that was cool. Now, I went out and tried to see if there were any properties on the market right now at this exact moment that matched up with the properties that I was looking at. And mind you, I'm always trying to find like the best of the best, the highest performing, all that, those kind of things, right? And unfortunately, the excitement kind of died down a little bit because I was reviewing the 2-bedrooms and the 3-bedrooms and seeing what they look like. And there's definitely a certain type of listing that performs obviously better than everything else. And I'll explain that in a second. But when I was looking at the properties that were for sale in this moment, I wasn't able to find anyone that I would be like pulled the trigger on without a doubt off of what's on Zillow, right? But when you look at the properties that have sold within the past little while, there are properties that do meet the 20% rule, that do meet the style and requirements of what I would want to purchase, which tells me that yes, these properties are coming online and they're just being sold quick. So Alan, that's where you're kind of going to jump in, where it's like, you obviously are seeing these properties over and over again. And my assumption is that this is a market you have to know inside and out and be ready to take action right away. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And especially in some of these areas where you're going to see a lot of like clusters of short-term rentals, you're going to have to be on the ready. And when something comes up, you got to be ready to pull the trigger on it. And so I would definitely echo your sentiments there. There are properties that are coming on the market, and the good ones, they go quickly. So you got to be ready to go.
Yeah. So, all the more reason to do your research and really know the market inside and out before you're even going to purchase there, right? Because it's not like there's just properties that are sitting there ready to go. So you understand. So once you know exactly what you're looking for, you've got like a good buy box ready to go. You're in contact with Alan, and then all of a sudden it pops up and you're purchasing it like that day, right? Like that's the kind of the way that I would see this to win in this market, right? Now, I had something else that I wanted to bring up too. The what the properties actually look like, right? So the ones that are doing over $75,000 or so, that's kind of like where I tend to look at. I look at the top performers. Now, that does not mean that all of the properties that don't meet the requirements of what I'm going to say right now would not be profitable. That's not what I'm trying to say, right? I'm just saying that these are the qualities that I was seeing that was maximizing the most amount of revenue. And they're probably going to sound stupid obvious, right? But the cabins in this area naturally do better, right? Cabins obviously do better. It's one of these areas where like if you have a cabin, it's what people are looking for. And so they want that. Now, the interesting thing that I found was that there was this one home that was actually a cabin, but had drywall inside. So the outside looked like a cabin, but the inside didn't. And the reason this was interesting was because the homes right above it that were making more money were worse listings, but they had that like wood interior. The part that I found even more interesting though was that the listings that were doing slightly better actually had tongue and groove and not like authentic log, you know what I mean, inside those homes. So to me, when I see that as an advantage where I'm like, well, you can put tongue and groove into a property and now all of a sudden it's a log cabin on the inside, right? And on the outside. And it's like an amenity that you'd be adding to your property that's going to allow you to perform really well. So to me, I found that super intriguing. That was sort of the first piece of criteria that I liked. The other one that I found was obviously if you can get a property with mountain views, right? You're up on the mountain and you have like true mountain views. Those are always going to win everywhere. But the other thing was that if you could actually get valley views. So if you had views from the base of the valley, but you had like a good amount of greenery, and you could actually see the mountains in the distance and had a piece of land there, that also allowed, people were also doing well with those types of properties too. So to me, I'm like, I find that intriguing, right? Because like if you see somebody who has mountain views, then somebody has valley views and they're roughly doing the same amount, it's like, well, that's intriguing because obviously valley views are cheaper than mountain views. And as you can tell, I'm always trying to find like the most optimal thing to purchase. That's how I'm like narrowing it down. And so I think there were some other things here I wanted to mention too as well. The lots of land, the interior, the wood, the cabin. And then also I found that most of the properties that were actually performing really well, not all, but most were in the Luray and Stanley area, but not in the downtown core. So in the outside of the Luray and Stanley area. And I actually like made a little map around avoiding the downtown area when I was looking on Zillow for both of those, just so I could see the properties that were just in the outskirts. So after doing all that research, there's properties out there that meet the 20% rule. You just have to be ready for them, right? And you have to be able to ideally try and maximize your revenue by doing some strategic things. So like, honestly, if I were to be going to look for a property in this area, it would be in Luray and Stanley on the outskirts of the towns. And it would have valley views rather than mountain views. And it would be most likely a 2-bedroom rather than a 3-bedroom. And it would have I would probably look for a property where I could add tongue and groove rather than anything else. That way I could kind of give myself an advantage, and then I would outdo it the way I would typically do it and try and add all the additional amenities. So like for anyone who's listening, that's my most optimal buy box. Doesn't mean that that's the only thing you can purchase, but that's just where I kind of landed after my research. So I just went on a long rant there, but any thoughts on that, guys?
I love it. Tell Steve I'm going to steal you. Work for me. Okay. So yeah, I have a few questions. So Alan, just offhand, like not holding you to, anything. So what is the average purchase price right now? Guys, if you're listening to this a year from now, this is, what month is it? It's July 2023. What's the average purchase price for a 2-bedroom in this market right now, just to kind of give people some context here? Hold on.
So this is going to be somewhat market specific, but it's like close to resort areas, you're going to see north of 300. So like between 300 and 370 is probably going to be like for a 2-bedroom, especially if it's like a ski chalet close to the slopes or something like that. But if it's close to like resort amenities or something that's really fun or attractive, like river access or something like that, you're going to see north of 300. And depending, like if it's got a lot of acreage, that's going to throw off like the numbers. So even if it's a 2-bedroom and it's got like 3 or 4 acres and it's got river access, it's going to be, north of 450, sometimes north of 500 just for that, same property. But, for a 2-bedroom in resort areas, close to amenities, probably I would say the reasonable range is like between 300 and 360. And
that's a really, really great price, especially if you compare to other popular, like, Eastern US mountain markets. That's still much lower than a lot of other markets. So I think this is like a really good deal. And John, back to you. So some things that we discussed in the previous episode about amenities. So it seems like there's a lot of opportunity to really create a super property without having to like really think too hard about it. So just having like a themed game room or something. So what did you see in terms of amenities? So you said obviously the mountain view, pastoral view. I really hate the word pastoral, by the way, but valley view. What do you see anything else besides those two things?
Yeah. Well, first off, what I want to mention is that I didn't find a load of amazing listings, like a ton of really strong, stellar listings, what I consider to be like a top tier property.
That's actually what I was hoping you were going to say, because that's the vibe that I got. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, like, I mean, we talked about this in the last episode too. I think it was for Gulf Shores, where I was surprised with how few great listings that there were, right? And when I say great listings, go look at some of the most popular markets that exist, like Austin, Nashville, Scottsdale, and take a look at those listings. You're going to find super listings, right? Like listings that are just done so perfectly. Go look on Airbnb's, Instagram page and look at the properties that they post. I'm not trying to say that you have to spend a crazy amount of money to actually make these listings work, but you can be very, very strategic with your listing for it to actually be profitable, right? So anyways, that's the first thing I want to mention, is that there wasn't a ton of people who were crushing it, but there was one person who had a really great listing. I'm actually looking at it right now. It really well put together, really well designed. And what I think is allowing this property to make more than most of the other listings around here. It's actually making like about 30,000 more than most of the other people. It's got a good piece of land. So it's got a little bit of like a good front yard grass area, but then it's also within that area, it has a fire pit with the Adirondack chairs surrounding it. It's got a hot tub with hanging lights surrounding all around that. And then it's got a nice little deck and some views there. So in my opinion, most of the time when it comes to these mountain towns, you really just need a fire pit and a hot tub. If you can nail those two things, if you can add those two things, great. But everybody else is also going to have those things. And so it's about taking those two amenities and amping them up. What I always call bringing them to life, right? So anybody could take a bunch of chairs, put them in a circle and put a little pit in the middle. But there's a big difference when you add string lights all the way around it and you add like nice chairs and you have like a good looking fire pit. And then it's also, it's not just on the grass, it's like on gravel and surrounded by, and it's really like its own area, right? It just looks so much better. And when it looks so much better, people are willing to pay more, right? And so that's how you get those higher ADRs. And the same thing goes for the hot tub, right? Don't just toss up a hot tub and take a photo of it with the cover on. Really bring it to life. Put some lights above it. Put some greenery around it. Put a neon light behind it if you wanted to. Put some like a deck a bar around it, and really bring it to life so that it's a place where people want to hang out. And when they see it, they want to book the home to be able to be in that really unique, great space that you've created for them. And so I think when it just comes to the Shenandoah area, if we're just focusing on amenities, it's design and it's hot tub and fire pit. If you could just nail those three, and I can't stress enough how important design is, because you want to create a space that people want to feel that they can spend time in, right? That they feel cozy in. Because Alan, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like it does get fairly cold in Shenandoah sometimes, correct?
Yeah, the coldest months are going to be January, February, but it doesn't get like frigid cold. Like it never gets it rarely gets below 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's usually like, even like during the coldest months, usually like 20s and 30s.
Yeah. So that's, that still, it's still not necessarily weather where like you're sitting out on the deck, right? And so the reason I bring that up is because if people can't do that, and you still want to get your home booked out, you've got to create a really cozy, comfortable space for them inside that's really makes them feel like they can spend time inside of the listing as well as standing outside. And so that's where I think design goes a really long way with these colder markets. That's something I've been noticing a lot. Design goes a long way everywhere, but just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
A few things I want to point out here. So this is the second market in a row that you've put a lot of emphasis on the strand hanging lights. So guys, that's a really inexpensive way to make your property more attractive, is to have around whatever your outdoor area is, the strand lighting. So, I mean, when he's saying design and how to set yourself apart, it doesn't always have to be like, oh, I went and paid an interior designer $200,000 to do my property. It's, throwing up some strand lights and taking a picture in the evening time, maybe a little more in depth than that. But you see what I'm saying. And I kind of feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because I don't own in this market, But it seems like you also, just the playing field of where the design is in this market compared to like a Nashville or a Scottsdale. If you're coming in as an experienced owner or host from one of those markets, and you apply some of those not necessarily that expensive design concepts here, you might really be able to knock it out of the park. Am I making a good assumption here?
Yeah, you are. This one listing, just the one listing that I'm looking at alone, that I think is at the level of what all of these listings should be at, is making quite a bit more than everybody else. Therefore, they are direct proof that if you put together a stellar listing with good design and the right amenities, you will make more than everybody else because people are willing to pay for it. Right, like, and this home, by the way, does not have tongue and groove or wood on side or views or valley views or literally any of the things that I said you would need to do well. And so, and it's a 2-bedroom and it's making 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and it's making $94,000 a year. Right.
Whoa.
So yeah, exactly. So, like I'm saying, the design, the amenities, the right photos, they go a very long way. And this is all the proof that you need to say that people are willing to pay a little bit more for a stellar listing in this area. But that's also true almost everywhere. People are always willing to pay more for a better listing with better photos, with better design, with better amenities. It's just how it goes.
So, Alan, are you seeing mostly when listings hit the market, are they mostly kind of those like grandma cabins that need, I call them brown cabins. They're just kind of like boring, need some updates, kind of blank canvassy, or are we seeing things hit the market from sophisticated operators that are already like there in terms of design?
So that's a good question. I am seeing a lot of what you'd call like grandma or gingerbread come on the market. And I feel like those are actually great opportunities because oftentimes they're priced accordingly and they're a great opportunity that can take a property that's a blank canvas and kind of really bring some nice design into it. Like, John was mentioning, being able to bring a designer in and make that property look at its best is really going to set you apart in this market. And I think there's a lot of properties coming on the market right now. And again, like the timestamp, and this is July 2023, but there's a lot of properties coming on the market that have a lot of great opportunity for somebody to come in, implement some great design and really set it apart. There are a few properties that are coming online in the market that I would say there's a few people that are trying to sell it like furnished as like a quote unquote turnkey. I know you hate that term, a quote unquote turnkey for, short-term rentals, but they're selling it furnished. And, sometimes these people haven't even used them as like Airbnbs or short-term rentals. They just use them as second homes and they're selling all the furniture with it. And, it's tempting to come in and say, hey, I could just walk in here and, list this on Airbnb. But I would, caution and say like, just because, the furniture may look nice to you, take a look around the neighborhood, take a look at the other Airbnb listings, look at, who else has got some good design going and use that to your advantage. Don't just say like, hey, it comes with furniture. Hey, it comes with these furnishings. I'm good to go. Definitely be mindful of design. And there's a lot of opportunities that are older properties that need some updates. That's a great way to come in the market. But I would say make sure that you are willing to put some work into it because you don't want to do this halfway.
Totally agree with that. And I will say the reason that I hate the word turnkey is because it's just so subjective and it means something different to everyone. So turnkey to somebody might be like secondhand mismatched furniture. Well, it's got everything in there I need. So here we go. But then I've seen people be buying like brand new construction and that comes fully furnished and like the crew forgot to take the wrapping off the refrigerator or something. And they're like, I was told this was going to be turnkey and I had to take this wrapping off the refrigerator myself. So that's why I just try to avoid using that phrase because it's so different for everyone. And there are some really great affordable remote designers like Paige Hayes. She's been on the short-term show before. Jenny Yee is another one where they'll work with any budget and they can do it all remotely. Sometimes they, depending on, what you order, what you want, they can do the whole thing remotely or they can come set it up. And they really do have options for every budget. So it's a lot easier now than it used to be to do that kind of thing.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely don't buy a property that's turnkey with furniture in it and just take photos. Please don't do that. Bring it to life. Anyone who does that, they're at the bottom of the pack making like $30,000 a year. Those properties are out there too, right? There's the one that's making 94, which is like what you should strive for, but the ones making 30 are out there too. And it's just bad operators. So if, like Alan was saying, I have courses on YouTube that you can go through that teach you exactly how to study your competition to make sure you don't make that mistake. So just look up my name and go from there.
All right.
I wanted to footstep something that Avery was saying, like, it's easy for you to like go and find somebody, like the resource you need to help your property succeed It has never been easier than today in the internet age to assemble the short-term rental Avengers and bring them to bear on your property. Making your property shine is not nowhere near as difficult. I think people overcomplicate it. They overthink it. But yeah, absolutely. There's lots of opportunities out there. Even in a low inventory market, there's stuff coming online that's worthwhile. You can really make shine and just hit it out of the park if you bring in the right resources.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that we need to regarding income numbers for this market that the listeners might benefit from as we're wrapping up?
Trying to think of, I've had a number of people ask me, about properties that are in HOAs versus not HOAs. One thing I've seen is the price levels that you're seeing on some of these properties are almost the inverse of what some people expect when it comes to HOAs. I've heard a lot of people say that HOAs help protect property values. In these markets where you've got lots of short-term rentals, any HOA that does not allow short-term rentals is actually hurting the price on their properties, which is kind of an odd thing that I didn't expect to see. But there's a lot of neighborhoods like in Page County, not too far from Luray, that don't allow short-term rentals, or they have, language in their HOA that, kind of makes it ambiguous that, people are avoiding. And those property values are hurting as a result. And so even if you're seeing if you're seeing a property that's got a low price and the property looks great, there's a good chance that it's not going to make a good short-term rental just because of the regulatory environment. So when you're running your numbers, make sure that you're including its suitability as a short-term rental as a result of the HOA. So the property price and the property's looks aren't always going to be a one-to-one indicator. So just make sure you're doing your due diligence and diving in and making sure why a property is at its current price level.
Yeah, that's actually something I've noticed across the board. So there's quite a few different markets around America where there'll be some homes that are not allowed, and some that are, but that are very close to each other. And you'll see the home value be $100,000 more simply because it can be turned into a short-term rental. And that's understood within the market. And so the things are priced a little bit higher, but it's a higher entry point, but at the same time, it holds more value because it has more opportunity, right? You're not constrained with the property you just purchased. So yeah, that is a trend everywhere.
Awesome. Well, really, really great information here today, guys. Super happy and excited to be on a podcast with both of you. A lot of great information. Guys, if you are interested in learning more about this market or short-term rental investing in general, you can join us every Thursday for a live Q&A. You can sign up for that at strquestions.com. You can also join our Facebook group. It's called Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth, same title as my book. Or if you're ready to just jump in and go straight to Shenandoah and start working with Alan, you can email him at Alan, ALAN, at theshorttermshop.com. And John, where can they find you if they want to follow you?
I am at the Airbnb data guy everywhere. So if you go and look that up anywhere, you can find me. I recommend anyone who doesn't know me to just watch most of my YouTube content so you can get to know me. And then from there, you can, reach out through Instagram and my email. So,
all right. Well, thank you guys so much. And we'll catch you on the next market segment, John.
See you there.